We ate like half of our pasta. Mia's coming better. Yeah.
Did you see if Brittany's gone on break, Carly?
Brittany's early, isn't she?
No, you need to edit that.
She said she lost.
You see if Carly
I
went.
almost think,
See if Haley's going. So I'm pretty sure most of them.
I almost think I read about him in the paper. I saw a car off the road right across from God.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to wait one more minute for people to join. Please make sure you have your mic muted. Have loud mics so you can speak up. There we go. Thank you. Usually I can mute. There we go. There we go. So we're going to wait one more minute to give people a chance to join. I've allowed mics and cameras, so people can be on camera or not as they choose, and you'll be able to unmute if you want to ask a question. We're going to be talking about, okay, we're going to go ahead and start. We're going to be talking about STARS levels 4 and 5 today. You'll receive a DPD form, and our attendance is going to be sent to Northern Lights at CCV, so this training will go into your credential account. If you have a question, you can either raise your hand by using the icon in the toolbar at the top of the page, or and I'll pause at intervals and people can unmute their mics and ask questions that way, or alternatively, you can also type them into the chat and we can answer that way. So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. Just hang on a second. So this is a presentation about STARS levels 4 and 5, improved and full implementation of the STARS elements of quality. For additional videos, I'm happy to say there are now some on the STARS website, STARS page of the CDD website, and as we continue to provide trainings, those will be recorded, and those recordings will be on the website as well. So really excited about that. There are also frequently asked questions and a survey, as well as other information about the STARS revised system that are available on the STARS page of the CDD website. Okay, and here we go. So before we get into the details of 4 and 5 STARS, I want to make sure that programs that are eligible for one of our streamline processes are aware of that, and so don't go through a process they don't need to in order to be eligible for a STARS level. So for programs, and the way that we determine whether a program or not is eligible for a streamline
You gotta lay down, buddy.
I
need my blanket. I'll cover you up. Let me shut off my mic. Hi, sorry everyone.
It's okay. Okay. To determine eligibility for streamlined processes, we did what we call a crosswalk. So taking the standards for the STARS revised system and the organization or entity that provides other types of accreditations or processes that they engage with in their programs. Comparing those two, we find that depending on which one it is, they either exceed the STARS standards or meet a STARS standard to a degree. And that's how we determine the STARS streamline eligibility. So programs with NACE accreditation, Head Start or Early Head Start managed programs are eligible for 5 stars automatically without completing the full STARS application. For programs that are Head Start or Early Head Start partner programs, in other words, the program is managed privately, services to children in that program, those programs are eligible. For either in the adult-child interactions element of quality. Programs that are fully implemented, yes, and by that we mean they are early MTSS implementation sites. Those programs are eligible for STARS level 5 in the adult-child interactions and in the responsive practices content areas. This is content areas, but what I mean is element of quality. NAFCC, which is National Association of Family Child Care accredited programs, meet the standards for adult child interactions at STARS level, family engagement at STARS level 2, and for responsive practices at STARS level 3. So in other words, if an AFCC accredited program wanted to apply for STARS, they would not need to demonstrate that they meet the standards for in these elements of quality at these STARS levels. Are there any questions about that? So there's a question in the chat about how often do you submit a STARS application? So you submit the STARS process is the same as it was. So every 3 years you'll renew your entire STARS application, and then in the interim years you'll submit an annual report. Oh, and Maggie typed it in the chat. Thank you, Maggie. Okay. So we're going to go ahead to, if there are no more questions about streamline eligibility, we will move to the next slide. So when applying for 4 stars or 5 stars, the program does not have to apply separately for the stars for STARS level 2 or 3, levels 2 and 3. Your QRIS plan, which is part of the STARS section, will build and be an update on the previous level, documenting how the goals were met. But you don't have to submit a CQI plan for the goals below the one you're currently applying for. Does that make sense, or should I explain it differently?
That means that if you are currently at a level, that's the level you start at.
Yes. Yes. Yes, if you have
Because-
4 stars now, you should apply for 4 stars in the new system. Yes.
Terrific.
Okay, I'm gonna advance to the next slide then. And there, before I say anything, before I go to the next slide, I mentioned in this slide that's continuous quality improvement plan. And if you haven't taken any of the other STARS trainings that we've been offering, there is a CQI plan training, and I think the recording's now available on the website. So you can review that to get some more information about what we mean when we're talking about continuous quality improvement plan or CQI plan for STARS. When a program enters the STARS system, a CQI plan based on the program's current level is developed as part of the application. The CQI, or continuous quality improvement process, is included in the program's application for each subsequent level and uses the CQI plan for the previous level as part of the evidence and documentation that level standards have been met. Each CQI plan will address the elements of quality for STARS that are defined in the STARS guidance manual, in which I will be talking about in the next slide. So, in other words, if you submit an application in a continuous quality improvement plan for STARS level 3, for example, you will use that continuous quality improvement plan to build upon for your STARS level 4 continuous quality improvement plan and application. In the same way, if you have applied for STARS level 4, you'll use that same continuous quality improvement plan to build upon for your STARS level 5 continuous quality improvement plan. Evidence from the continuous quality improvement cycles show improvement as you move to each higher level. Improvement and improvement in the implementation of the elements of quality of STARS.
Hey, Joanna, if we
Yes.
have, all of us who are in the STARS system, do we have something that's going to translate to a CQI, or are we
Yeah.
starting from ground zero?
So the closest thing to a CQI plan that everyone does now in the whole early childhood system is a IPTIP. So when you create an IPTIP, you create goals for your professional development, and then you say how you're going to meet those, what the trainings are that you're going to take specifically. And a CQI plan for STARS is more comprehensive than that, but it's a similar process.
Well, isn't there something around what's your plan in the current thing? Don't you have to submit?
Yes, if you have a program assessment, you have to submit a program improvement plan, and that is a similar process as well.
And can I go back to that one, and that's a starting place?
Yes.
I mean, at levels 4 and 5, that's part of the former STARS process, right?
At levels 4 and 5, you would have had a program assessment. Yes, most likely. So you're starting, and at levels 4 and 5, if you're a UPK pre-qualified, a lot of the things that you do for your UPK pre-qualification and participation are things you're going to use for your CQI plan and your STARS application as well.
Okay, I just want to know where to look for materials that I've already created rather than recreating things.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than creating things from scratch. I want to use what I've got. Right.
So I'll be able to tie that in a little more as we move through here, but
Perfect.
If your program has 4 or 5 stars now, it's very likely that a lot of the materials you've collected, you can use as your information to begin building your CQI plan.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions about the CQI plan and building on the levels before I move to the next slide? Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead now. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are elements of quality in STARS, each one of which will be addressed in your STARS application and CQI plan. And there are standards within each element of quality at each level of STARS. I'm going to define these elements of quality so you can understand really clearly what they are. And I'll also talk about what kinds of documents and what kinds of evidence you'll use that align with the elements of quality of STARS. So first, adult-child interactions means, for the purposes of STARS, mutual or reciprocal action or influence between an adult and a child. This reciprocal action is characterized by communication as adults and children work or spend time together. Nurturing, supportive, and reciprocal adult-child interactions are foundational to the learning process. In your STARS application and CQI plan, the way that adult-child interactions will be the way that you'll get information to use for your plan and your application is from program assessment. And then in next slide, we'll talk about the program assessments and that we're using for STARS and how those will be accessed. The next element of quality is family and youth engagement. If your program doesn't serve youth, you don't have to have a youth engagement in your CQI plan. But if your program does serve children above the age of 9, then you do need to include youth strategies for youth engagement as part of your program, as part of your continuous quality improvement plan. So family engagement is a shared responsibility in which schools and early childhood programs and other community agencies and organizations are committed to reaching out to engage families in meaningful ways, and in which families are committed to actively supporting their children's learning and development. Youth engagement is, in this case, it would be after school programs, reaching out to youth to ensure youth voice and participation in program planning and reflection on all programmatic aspects. The way that programs can collect information about how they're doing with family and youth engagement is to use the Strengthening Families program self-assessment, the Youth Thrive survey, and the tools that are available on the Center for the Study of Social Policy website that are provided to support the Strengthening Families and Youth Thrive frameworks. All those materials are available at no cost. And then the last element of quality of STARS, I'm gonna pause at the end of the slide, Ellen, if that's okay with you. And then I can, and then you can go ahead and ask your question. Responsive practice is teaching strategies that are specific to individual children and youth's interests, needs, developmental level, family culture, language, racial and ethnic diversity, and gender identity. Responsive practice requires awareness of one's own views about difference and the ability to understand the varying cultural and community norms of children and their families. Responsive teaching and caregiving bridges gaps in communication and understanding so that supportive interactions between children, youth, program staff, and families can occur. The way that you'll get information about how well you're implementing responsive practice is through doing child observations, through using child assessment tools or child screening tools, and by engaging children and youth in order to allow them to use their voice in your program. And Ellen, you have your hand up. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, those wonderful resources that you listed, will those be made available to us as we're filling out the sections?
Do you mean the Strengthening Families and Youth Thrive framework?
Yeah, and just basically everything that you just said early on, you listed all these great places that we could, you know, model our.
So there are, if you, on the STARS website, there is a guidance manual, and Maggie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are links to those resources in the guidance manual, and they're all available, you know, they're all available just by typing in your search bar a couple of letters. Like for Strengthening Families, if you type CSSP in your search bar, it will come up and you'll be able to find all the information there. But yes, we have links available. And as far as I know, there are also, Vermont AEYC already provides trainings on strengthening families, and there'll be trainings available on class as well, which is a program assessment tool. So yes, the answer to your question is I'm not providing them here in this PowerPoint, but they are available on the STARS website.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Here's a question. The slides aren't changing on your screen. Did it change now? Oops.
I'm still seeing slide number 3.
Okay, let me go back and see if I can, I don't know why that is. It's advancing on my screen. So let's see, slide 3. So you don't see slide 4 now?
No.
Okay. How about now?
I see slide 4.
Okay.
I'm still on slide 3.
It just moved from 5 to 4, back to 4.
That's where I'm
Okay.
at.
So I just moved it to 4. Now let me see if how about now?
Mine just moved to 5.
I can see
Okay.
5.
Can anybody not see 5?
I'm still seeing 3. I don't, maybe
Yeah.
it's my computer.
You should all be able to change it on your own, and then a button should pop up next to the slides for you to sync to the presenter.
Oh,
Rockstar.
Wow, I didn't know that.
My sync is to slide 3, it says. So I've been moving it manually.
So maybe don't sync to the presenter.
It says sync to presenter and it's in red. It says slide 3. I'm like, nope, don't want 3.
Interesting. Let me try stopping to share and start up again and see if that makes any difference. And if not, I guess, is there anybody who is not seeing slide 5 who can't move their slides on their own screen. And this is the first time this has happened, so I don't know how to fix it.
Will we be able to access these slides later?
I'm gonna
Like
send you
once
attachments.
Cool.
So I'm gonna send you this slide, this slide deck when I send you DPD form. So you'll have all the slides.
Okay.
And I am just gonna stop sharing for a second and try to reshare and see if that doesn't help. Okay. What do you all see? Y'all see 5?
Yep.
Okay. Now let's see what happens if I try to advance it to 6.
Yep.
Okay. Oh my gosh. All right.
There
Technology.
isn't a sync button anymore. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe that somehow popped up there and so.
Okay. Mercury must be in retrograde. I don't know. Anyway, so for the adult-child interactions element of quality, as I mentioned before, program assessment is how you'll set the baseline for your continuous quality improvement plan and STARS application. And I see a hand up, so before I delve into this slide, you have a question, Kim?
Yeah, just a quick question. I wanted to make sure I heard correctly. Did you say that like some of the past trainings are being recorded now? So if we wanted to kind of
Yes.
how would we do that? Just go to STARS and they'll be listed somewhere, or
they're on the STARS webpage of the CDD website, and they're YouTube videos. I think you just be able to click on them and play them.
Perfect.
Yep. And they just went on, I mean, probably a couple hours ago.
Ooh,
New
fresh.
hot off the presses. Yeah. So, okay.
Thank
you. Yeah. So for the STARS Level 4 CQI plan will include goals based on the scores or rating the program receives from the program assessment. If the program is increasing from STARS Level 3, the application will also include the plan goals regarding improvements identified in the program assessment process. For early childhood programs, and that includes family child care, public school preschool, and center-based programs, we use the CLASS tool, which stands for Classroom Assessment Scoring System. For after-school programs, we use the program quality assessments. There's a school-age program quality assessment, a youth program quality assessment, and a social-emotional learning program quality assessment. The youth and school-age assessments are based on the ages of the children, and the SEL PQA is for all ages. If the program is an implementation site for early MTSS, there will be a teacher program observation tool, or TPOT assessment, used as part of that process. And that will be the assessment the program will use for their STARS application. For everyone else, the Sparks program will be providing assessments for STARS. The Vermont AEYC is the administration of the Sparks program, and they're in the process of hiring assessors and the assessors will be trained and will be available to do program assessments in the fall. And I don't want to overpromise on dates, so I'm not even going to try to guess when that will be. As soon as it can, but it might take a little while. For STARS Level 4, the assessment is given for a score or a rating, and the results fall in the middle range of what the national averages are for that program assessment. So and I just want to mention at STARS level 3 programs have a program assessment that the program assessment is not scored, and the program just receives written feedback to work on improvement. At STARS level 5, each classroom or group receives an assessment by a Sparks assessor using class, PQA, or if it's an early MTSS implementation site, TPOT, and that's provided by the by who's ever providing the coaching for the program in using early MTSS. The assessment is scored or rated, and the results are in the high range of national averages or show marked improvement over the scores at the 4-star level. Any questions about that? So if you, Sue, I think you asked the question before, if you can use a program assessment or a program improvement plan, it probably wouldn't help you much if your assessment previously that you had for STARS was not using class. But if you have had a program assessment using class, then the program improvement plan that you wrote, you can definitely use to develop your CQI plan for STARS.
Do you create your CQI before or after the assessor comes?
So the CQI plan is going to be based on the assessment feedback. So everything in your CQI plan is going to be based on information you have about how you're doing in each one of those elements of quality. So you wouldn't want to start your CQI plan for the adult-child interactions element of quality without using the information from the assessment.
Yes.
Yep.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Because it just would be, you wouldn't have anywhere to go from because you wouldn't be able to set what your goals are.
So Joanna, is it safe to say if you are due, if your 3-year application is due like July to September, to hold off to basically September because Sparks assessment needs to happen in order to apply for a level 4? And so it's kind of a moot point to do anything until Sparks hires someone to then go out into the...
Yes.
Now, are those programs going to be like, not, what am I trying to say? Are those programs going to be categorized like if you're due this year for your 3-year, are those Sparks assessors going to notify those programs first?
No, it would. So if you need to renew your STARS and you can't access program assessment, you won't be penalized for that. We'll just extend your due date so that you have time to have an assessment. So that's one thing. Programs are, the way that the Spark system is set up and the way the program assessments will happen is you'll be notified by the STAR system, the data that we have about your program or the information we have about your program is we know when you need an assessment and we'll tell you, but it's up to the individual program to contact Sparks to request the assessment the way it's set up now. So that, so you might get an email from me or from the person who succeeds me in this position saying, here, it's time for you to request your program assessment and here's the information. But
okay,
the Sparks assessor is not going to contact you first.
Okay, but that email saying, hey, you need an assessment for level 4, that email is going to come from the STARS or like your department.
Yep.
Okay.
In a perfect world. I guess
So
yes, that's our plan.
do we know, or can we be proactive and email Sparks people yet, or does that not exist? And say,
it would
hey,
be
I
a
need,
bit,
you know,
it would be too soon
okay,
now to email them to request an assessment for sure,
Okay.
because they're still hiring,
right,
you know.
right. I just didn't know if like they have a
Right.
queue of emails and then they'll disperse them basically when they have assessors.
They will, but I don't believe that's set up yet. As
Okay.
they still haven't hired the folks that would do that work. So,
Okay.
you know, just, I think hold off probably till there's announcement that the Sparks
Okay.
system's ready to go, is what I would say.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I continue to the next slide? Okay, so here we go. Oh, there's another question in the chat. Hang on. So this is a question about early Head Start classrooms. So so for Head Start or early Head Start partner programs, there who receive a program assessment through Head Start using class, then they don't have to have another assessment by a Sparks assessor. They can use the class assessment they had through Head Start or whatever Head Start program assessments being used. But I think it's still class. The last I heard. All right. So we're going to move on to family and youth engagement. So programs will be able to increase family and youth engagement in the program using the tools available on the Center for the Study of Social Policy website. Programs will meet these standards by providing support for families and youth to increase protective factors that have been identified as prevention strategies against child abuse and neglect. The highest level of family and youth engagement that is recognized in STARS is when families or youth are actively engaged in the leadership of the program, including setting policy and decision-making. So at level 4, programs are going to measure the effectiveness of program structures that strengthen families and engage youth voice that were implemented in level 3 and support at least 3 family protective factors or Youth Thrive protective factors from the Center for the Study of Social Policy, strengthening families or youth thrive frameworks. At level 5, programs will demonstrate that they've continued to provide support for those protective factors and that they also have involved families and youth in leadership, program leadership. Any questions about that?
My only concern is that my capacity for learning all of these frameworks. You know, I'm hoping that there are going to be aspects of strengthening families framework and the other one that you were talking about that I'm not familiar with that maybe doesn't apply because we don't serve youth, but just hopefully there are aspects of my program that I'm going to be able to list and a Sparks person or a STARS help person can say, yeah, that fits. That's part of it. I don't want to have to I know the strengthening families framework is huge. And I'm hoping that I don't have to go through that whole framework with a highlighter and pull stuff out. I'm hoping that I can recognize the strengths of my program, articulate them, and a STARS assessor says, yeah, that fits.
So what I would suggest is what you would want to do is go to the CSSP website and then look up what the protective factors are, because there's only 5, and they're pretty straightforward. And there are strategy sheets for each one of the strategic, for each one of the protective factors, and it's like a 1-pager, and it just gives you ideas for things you can do. So you don't have to know it, and you don't have to make it up. You can just go right to the website and access and take for your own use the resources that are there. And you may find, you know, once you look at those, you may say, oh, I do that by doing this in my program.
Right.
Yeah. And a Sparks person could also help you with that process.
Perfect. Thanks, Joanna.
Yep. Ellen?
Yeah, would an example of involving families and youth in program leadership be something like your annual questionnaire? Would that be an example of that?
Well, that would be a way that you would identify that you have done that. But the more active, so it would be that it would be a more active process if you were engaging them in program leadership. For example, you might have a parent advisory group that you would bring issues to that you wanted to think through with them about how, you know, about some policy you might have. It could be anything. Or you might include them if you were planning a community event and parents wanted to be, and you wanted to involve families in that type of activity. Or, you know, it would be if the program was doing fundraising, either for the program itself or for another purpose, and families were being involved in that, that would be involving families or youth in leadership in the program. Those are a couple examples. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay, if you don't have any more questions, I'm going to move us along to the next slide. So I separated responsive practice between STARS Level 4 and STARS Level 5 out, just because there's a lot of, it's kind of there's a little bit more detail in responsive practice than in some of the other ones. And as I mentioned, you'll get information from which to formulate your CQI plan by the use of child observations and of your own devising, and use of early teaching strategies gold and ASQ3 or ASQSE. The OUT scale can also be used for, that's, some people like that better than TS Gold for infants and toddlers. And as I mentioned, also it would be by the process of observing children on a regular basis while they're doing activities to determine what their interests are, and to determine what their interests are, so that program planning can be based on what children are interested in. Because one of the things we know about adult learning is adults learn better when they have identified their learning objectives, and that's not different for children. So, but they're just not as necessarily as able to tell us what it is that they actually are curious about. So, so, and so I've just reframed that a little bit. So TS Gold and ASQ tools help determine if a child has an identified need or is meeting benchmarks for learning and development. But it's also important for teachers and caregivers to gather information about children's interests, their strengths, their family culture, their language, race and ethnicity, and gender identities, so the program can be structured to better facilitate their learning and enhance the child's positive experiences, and also set a positive precedent for children for their future learning experiences. For children in after-school programs, observations will not be the preferred way to get to know the unique aspects of each child. Instead, programs will develop a process for cultivating youth voice in the determining child and youth voice in the determining of program activities. So, and I want to just emphasize at STARS Level 4, learning activity planning will include information from child observation and input, will consider children and youth's interests, needs, developmental level, and racial and ethnic diversity, and will align with VELS or Vermont After School Program standards. Any questions about that? Nope.
I put it in the chat. It's ASQ and TS Gold or one or the other.
Best practice would be both because they're different. They're different, yep. But if you have information, you can get enough information out of what I would rather see one or the other and your own child observations.
Great.
Not
Perfect.
in a, not in a structured framework than both
Got
of those.
Totally. Yep.
So,
perfect.
Ellen, your hand's up. Did you have a question?
No, I think I just didn't unraise it. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's all right. I just didn't want to skip over you if you still had one. Okay, I'm going to go to level 5. Then, because I want to get through these before, actually, I think this is the last one. Oop. Are we all looking at number 5? Responsive practice standards level 5. Okay. So early childhood programs utilize child assessment and child screening and child observations, record observations, and use them for learning activity planning. When more than one adult regularly interacts with a group of children, observation and planning will involve team members. So that's the one step level of intensity higher at 5 is that evidence that there's a team process for planning when there is a teaching team. Obviously, if it is a family childcare, there may not be a teaching team. If the childcare program has a mentor teacher for you peak to meet universal pre-K criteria, then they would want to show that they have had planning meetings with their UPK teacher, with their licensed teacher for UPK. And there is a slightly higher level of complexity in what the learning activity planning will take into account. So we'll include information from child observation and input. It will consider children's and youth's interests, needs, developmental level, family culture, language, racial and ethnic diversity, and gender identity. And it will be developmentally appropriate and align with VELS or Vermont After School Program standards. So basically, if you go to the guidance manual and look at the level 5 standards or the standards for responsive practice, the program is fully implementing all of those standards as part of their program planning and implementation of activities in their program. Are there any questions about that? Okay. So for the CQI plan, I think a lot of people have had the question of where do I start? And so the continuous quality improvement plan it's an evidence-based process. So the first thing that you do is find, evidence could mean information. In this case, it definitely does. So it's factual information about how your program implements the elements of quality, the 3 elements of quality. You get that information by doing the Strengthening Families Program Self-Assessment or Youth Thrive survey, by implementing child observations and using TS Gold or ASQ3 or other published child assessment tools or child screening tools to give you a baseline about information about children, so that you're using using specific information about children to determine what you're going to do in your classroom with them day to day. And that's your baseline for responsive practice, for setting your goals, for implementing them in your CQI plan. If you, the CQI plan form is available on the STARS website, and if people want it, if one person puts in the chat they want it, I'll just attach it to everybody's DPD form. Okay, so I'll do that. When you get your DPD form, you'll have other things attached so that you can grab them easily and be able to use them for your STARS plan. So as I actually probably never did say this, but at level 4, you're implementing the standards of the elements of quality at a level above a beginning level of implementation. Level 3 is the beginning level of implementation. And at level 5, your CQI plan addresses goals at level 5, you've achieved full implementation of the STARS standards, and your continuous quality improvement plan addresses the goals for maintaining that full implementation of best practice. And you may also want to address other quality factors that are important to your program, that aren't included in the STARS elements of quality. Any questions about that? Okay. And if you do think of questions that you didn't get to ask, you can email me, or you can call this number. This is our toll-free number. And I may not, if I don't answer the phone, please do leave a voicemail and I'll be sure to return it and answer your question.
Joanna, it's Maggie. I was in and out a little bit, and there were some questions I might have missed that you answered about